Hey, what's up? Chris Seiter here. Today we're going to be talking about hot and cold behaviors and what they really mean. So, if you stick around to the end of this video, I'm actually going to be teaching you the 5 most common hot and cold behaviors based on real life experiences and dissecting their actual meanings. This is something that I don't see anyone out there doing, so I'm really excited to do it for you. Oh yes, and a couple of things before we start. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button below and click the bell notification so you can get notified anytime I come out with a new video or even respond to your comments. Okay, hot and cold behaviors. I thought a lot about how to structure this video and thought the best thing that I could do was actually to create a special presentation for you so that you can actually have some visual aids as I'm talking. So from this point on, I'm going to switch to my computer so that you can actually understand hot and cold behaviors and what they really mean. In preparation for this YouTube video, I actually went onto our private Facebook group and actually quizzed a few of the men and women there to ask them what hot and cold behaviors they have actually experienced throughout their process of trying to get their exes back. So everything that you see me talk about here is going to be from them. These are real behaviors that have really happened to people, and I'm going to dissect them and explain what exes really mean when they do this to you. So the first and most common hot and cold behavior I see is where an ex says, I love you, and then does a complete 180 and says, I don't have feelings for you anymore. So what do they mean? Well, what this really means is that your ex is a slave to the moment with how they are feeling. So however they're feeling in the moment, they're making comments about how they're feeling, or they're making comments because of how they're feeling, and they probably made the I love you statement during an excited or emotional moment, and they also probably made the I don't have feelings for you statement during an angry or emotional moment when they're not getting their way. That's an important thing to understand. Most people are going to react very specifically with how they are feeling. We are all impulsive, but breakups can even enhance this impulsiveness even more. The second most common hot and cold behavior is where your ex consistently sends you positive text messages and then suddenly becomes unresponsive. Now, why would an ex do this? Well, there's a couple of reasons. First off, the conversation is probably boring them, right? Sometimes when I'm dealing with coaching clients, the biggest thing I work with them on is becoming interesting in conversation. We have a tendency to all be a little self-interested. Therefore, we're talking about things that interest ourselves, but not really interest our exes. So my guess is what happened here is the initial conversation started because the conversation was interesting, or the ex was interested in what you had to say, but somewhere along the way, things grew boring and that stopped. Conversations no longer became interesting, and it felt like more of a hassle to contact you or to respond to you because they're not really getting anything out of it. So the fix here is to maybe find a way to become a little bit more interesting in your conversations. The third most common hot and cold behavior is where your ex continually makes plans to see you and then keeps finding excuses to cancel. This happened for one particular coaching client of ours. This happened a lot. And in order to properly explain this one, we need to explain this concept of this internal conversation. So a lot of you may not know this, but there is a thing where exes can have these internal conversations with themselves, and when they're kind of left alone, that's really when this internal conversation happens. So let's say you go out with your ex and you're having a great time and it's exciting and they say all sorts of nice things to you and they create this intent to hang out with you or see you, or they're talking on the phone with you and they say like, yeah, I'd love to see you, and they're all excited, and then they kind of get left alone and all the doubts start to creep in. That is what probably is happening here, where they get really excited, and this is really common with hot and cold behavior number 1 as well. They get really excited, and then sort of when they're left alone, they start thinking about things. They start thinking about the past relationship and why that was wrong, and they start thinking it's a bigger risk for them to see you. So they make the intent to hang out known during a moment of being excited, and then during the quiet moments, they talk themselves out of it or think it's too much of a hassle to hang out with you.
And then, of course, we have hot and cold behavior number 4. This is really interesting, and not everyone will experience this type of hot and cold behavior from exes, but this is a real life thing that happened with someone on our Facebook group. This is where an ex goes looking at houses together with you and talks about getting married to you, only to claim that the aforementioned was never said or discussed. They go in complete denial. And my guess is what happens here is that you're moving too fast too soon. Again, I think the one commonality you're going to find between most hot and cold behaviors is the fact that human beings tend to be very impulsive, right? So how they're feeling in the moment can indicate how they're acting sometimes. So a lot of times when you're checking out houses together or you're talking about marriage, you're really excited, but maybe sometimes the mere act of talking about marriage or going and checking out houses can freak you out a little bit. I'll never forget when I still lived in Texas and my girlfriend at the time lived in Pennsylvania. We were looking at houses together in Pennsylvania. I was going to move up there for her. She later became my wife, who I'm married to now currently. But the whole experience was a little scary. And it wasn't scary because, I didn't have feelings or anything like that. I loved her more than anything I've ever loved or anyone I've ever loved before. But the whole experience was scary because it was moving so fast and I wasn't sure if it was okay for it to be moving fast. Here's my point. If sometimes things are moving too fast too soon, it can freak people out and they can react in all sorts of strange ways. All right, so hot and cold behavior number 5. This is where you just slept together and they literally don't want anything to do with you afterwards. So what causes them to do this? Well, in my experience, what happens here is they probably got exactly what they wanted and are losing interest. So what does that mean? Well, some men and women only just want to have sex with you, and that's it. They just want a friends with benefits type scenario. And now that they've got what they wanted, they've slept with you, and you seem all very excited about it, but every time you try to start things up again or talk and have a normal conversation with them, they lose interest really quickly. And what you find happens in situations like these is when they do finally get in touch with you, it's always about sex. You're a booty call, or now booty calls aren't as common anymore. Booty calls are kind of disguised as hangouts, right? Your ex will say all sorts of nice things to you. They'll make all sorts of false promises, but it always ends up leading towards sex and nothing ever gets done. If you find yourself in this self-perpetuating cycle, it's not a good sign. So those are the 5 most common hot and cold behaviors. I encourage you guys to actually rewind this particular presentation and watch it and take notes so that you can understand why your ex is acting the way he or she is acting.